Welcome back, Bronco Nation, from the bye week, and welcome back to the Bronco Blameyer Studios here. I am finally home. It's been a long few weeks on the road, and finally getting to preview a game for Boise State this season at home. However, Boise State's going to have the opposite effect this week as they are going on the road after opening up their home seat opener last week versus Eastern Washington, getting a win that put them somewhat back on track. They now have an opportunity to go on the road against a Mountain West opponent to open up their conference slate, and it couldn't be a more challenging team. Boise State will go and play Air Force at Air Force. This is going to be a Saturday, September 20th, finally getting to play on a Saturday, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, CBS Sports Network. Boise State favored in this game by 10.5 points and given an 82.9% chance of winning, but that doesn't matter. This could not be a more challenging opening to the conference schedule for Boise State, and doesn't really have a lot to do with how good Air Force is. This is an Air Force program that crushed an FCS team and then went and lost badly on the road versus Utah State. A little bit of the opposite of what Boise State has experienced so far, obviously losing badly on the road and then crushing an FCS team. So we don't really know how good either of these teams are, but I will say, while we don't know how good Bronco Mendenhall's Utah State team is, Air Force did not look very good on the road versus Utah State, losing that game 30-49, and honestly, it really wasn't even that close. Utah State controlling the game pretty much throughout the entire matchup. Air Force, a team that really struggled last season, one of the worst Air Force teams under Troy Calhoun, at least in recent years, and expected a significant step up. Doesn't seem like they've made that big a step, but we are going to learn a lot about both of these programs. And regardless, whether Air Force is good, whether Boise State is bad or good, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter how good either of these programs are, because this is always a close game for Boise State. This is a game that there have been some times when Boise State's been able to pull away and make it a big win, but routinely, Air Force has been a very tough nut to crack for Boise State, whether it's going and playing at elevation or it's just facing this offensive style. Air Force has a lot of wins on the blue as well, one of the few teams out there that has multiple wins on the blue, because this style is so hard to plan against. And for Boise State, a team that has struggled with being prepared, at least in the early part of this season, especially week one, this is going to be a massive test. It's a massive test for where this team is right now in the season. How far have they come from week one? But also, it's a massive test for their goals the rest of the year. The CFP seems like a distant dream, not in their control right now. A lot of things are going to have to happen outside of Boise State's control to get there. But there is one thing, and it's their number one goal every single year. CFP is a goal as well, written on the wall. But their number one goal written on the wall is to win their conference championship. This is their last season in the Mountain West. This is their last opportunity to establish themselves as the top team in this conference and one of the top teams in the group of five before they move on to the Pac-12. And it all starts this week versus Air Force. So I know that's a little bit of a long intro, but this game could not be more important for Boise State. I feel like I've said that the first 2 weeks, but they have been. They have all three of these games have been so important for Boise State, but this one, perhaps more than any other, because it is a conference matchup and it is the core starting block of Boise State's central goals. This game carries massive, massive weights for both teams. For Air Force for a chance to recover, but for Boise State a chance to build towards their end season goals. So we are going to go through the series histories between both of these programs. We'll look at key players for both Boise State and Air Force. So Air Force fans, if any of you survived that intro, there is stuff for you in here as well. And then we're going to go through the keys to the game for Boise State. And then we'll talk about a summary at the end and a score prediction, which of course brings me to my favorite part of all of my videos, which is getting to interact with each and every one of you in the comments below. Right now, go pause the video, go down, give me your score predictions in the comments below. Boise State versus Air Force, what is the final score going to be? Any other thoughts you have on the matchup? Of course, this season, the winner of each week's score prediction challenge will be entered into a drawing at the end of the season to win this Ashton Jeanty jersey. So please give me your thoughts. And again, you can be the same score prediction. If multiple people get the exact score right, multiple people will win. It's only when nobody gets it right exactly that I then go with just the closest score. Now, while you're putting those score predictions in and giving me your thoughts on the game, I actually have an awesome opportunity to tell you about for Boise State fans living in Boise. This is an amazing opportunity. I'm so excited to say that this is actually a sponsored video. Expedia Cruises of Boise, they're opening up a store in Boise. It's going to be right off of McMillan Road, and they are having a grand opening in a couple of weeks for the App State game. So on Saturday, September 27th, they're going to have a grand opening well before kickoff. That game announced as a 5:30 p.m. kickoff game. Well, they're going to have an 11 a.m. opening. Fans can come by, can get tailgates, eats, and prizes and giveaways. They're also going to have an opportunity to get some autographs from some Boise State legends. TJ Akery, part of the early years of Boise State, leading receiver for Boise State in 2004, had over 900 yards receiving. Huge offensive weapon for Boise State. He will be there signing autographs. You also have Ricky Changachu, one of the great international players that Boise State has brought in. Always done a great job recruiting internationally. Ricky Changachu, one of those legends, part of the Kellen Moore through the end of the Kellen Moore era there. Huge contributor to the 2012 and 2013 seasons. And then Tyreek Jones, a fan that should be a name that should be very familiar to Boise State fans. Obviously part of that very dominant defensive performance between him and JL Skinner. The two of them were such a tackling legend, and Tyreek Jones will also be there signing autographs at noon. And then at 1 p.m., you'll have an opportunity to hear about some awesome opportunities from Pete Hayes of Holland America Cruises. So this is an awesome opportunity for Boise State fans. It's well before kickoff. You can start your pre-game experience going to this, doing a little bit of tailgating, getting some autographs, and then roll into the regular Boise State tailgating before the game. So I highly encourage everyone to go check out this event. Again, September 27th in a couple of weeks. You'll have an opportunity to hear about it in my game review and also my preview for the App State video as well. And I'm going to put a link in the description below. Please go check out their website and the awesome opportunities that they have. So thanks again, everybody. I hope then all your thoughts and score predictions are in the comments below, and let's move on with the rest of the video here. So, Boise State, series history versus Air Force. This is a series that has been very close in the past. Now, Boise State has pulled out a little bit of an edge here. They now lead the series 8-4, and while Air Force has still managed to pull off a win here and there, most notably last in 2021, Boise State has somewhat solidified their standing. This series started in 2011, Boise State winning that game, but even with Kellen Moore, and not a very good Air Force team, it was still close, 37-26 on the blue. Boise State winning that game. But then 2014, Air Force would get their first win in the series. A very memorable loss, obviously, at Air Force. Boise State losing that game 28-14. And Air Force would win the next two games in the series. At one point, Air Force led this series 3-2 versus Boise State. But then 2017, Boise State would get a pretty massive win. Boise State on the blue, 44-19. A lot of revenge in that game. And then they would go on to win 3 straight, tipping the scales. Like I said, Air Force getting a victory in 2021, again on the blue, during the Avalos era though, so not sure it really counts. And then Boise State winning these last 2 games, including the last matchup in 2024. Even with Ashton Jeanty though, and on the blue, not a blowout game. Boise State winning that game pretty closely, 27-19. So, Boise State versus Air Force, a very important game, and it's all going to start with these key players here. Specifically, you're going to hear a little bit of a reverse. Usually we start off talking about the offense in these videos because that is such an important aspect of what Boise State does. But against Air Force, I think the most important player on this Boise State team is going to be Braxton Freely. He is a player for Boise State that obviously came back, entered into the transfer portal, decided to come back, and it has been a massive part of the game plan for Boise State on this defensive line. He's played very well, had 7 tackles versus USF, was really one of kind of the shining moments of that game, a game that didn't have very many of them, obviously. But for Braxton Freely, he played very well in that game. Eastern Washington, only 1 tackle, but it was Eastern Washington. We didn't really need him to do very much. But we need him to step up and really take over this game. Again, he's played well, but he has an opportunity to do even more. I think he has so much more potential. And when you're talking about Air Force, it all starts with that defensive line, stopping that fullback dive. And the interior defensive linemen starting the defensive tackle here with Braxton Freely are going to be absolutely essential to forcing Air Force to go out on the edge where Boise State has a greater chance of stopping them. Now, for Boise State, offense still a key in this game. Obviously, Sire Gaines for Boise State got an opportunity to step up and be the main back. We expected him to be coming into the season, and in week 1, he wasn't. Well, in week 2, he certainly stepped into that role. Huge 46-yard run, not a touchdown, but long run right off the bat, and he kept on churning. 14 carries last week, and he has over 140 yards so far on the season between the 2 games and a 6.2-yard average. I'm going to talk about it in my keys of the game, a little sneak peek ahead, but the running game is going to be very, very important for Boise State in this matchup, and it all starts with Sire Gaines. You're just starting to see the taste of what he could do, the potential, what we saw flash last year, much more sustained this season. He just needs to be a little bit more consistent, and you can tell that he is going, If he continues on this track, you can tell he's going to be one of the all-time greats for Boise State in that class with the Ashton Genties and the Doug Martins and the Jay Ajays and the Ian Johnsons, all of those guys. He has that potential, and there's an opportunity for him in week 4, third game, to step up into that potential this week, and we need him to. And then Maddox Madsen, he's going to be on here, obviously, because the offense is going to flow through the quarterback, especially in a team where he's been asked to step up and be more of a playmaker. We saw he had that potential last week, a very different version of Maddox Madsen than we saw in week 1. A version that we thought we would see throughout this season, and he stepped into that role. Now, obviously, Eastern Washington, much easier defense that you're dealing with, but he was coming in with a lot more confidence, and he was also playing a lot more loose. Now, again, part of that is defense you're going up against. However, he needs to continue that. When you're talking about who is this Boise State team, what do we learn about them, a lot of that rests on Maddox Madsen. Is he the quarterback we saw in week 1 versus USF, or is he more the quarterback we saw in week 2? Can he be that confident versus a defense that is certainly not going to be one of the top defenses in the Mountain West, but a defense that will certainly challenge you? Can he step up into that role? Well, so far this season, 532 yards passing, 41 of 72, 532 yards passing, 56.9% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, interception. We need him to step up into what we saw versus Eastern Washington, and I believe he has that potential. Can Boise State establish an offense around him with a running game that gives him that opportunity to step up into that role? We'll find a lot about this Boise State team and about Max Madsen in this week versus Air Force. Now, for Air Force, they have a very dangerous offense. Every player I'm going to talk to you about right now is an offensive player. Not super impressed so far by the Air Force defense, especially an Air Force defense that gives up 49 points. Doesn't really matter, though, because this is an Air Force offense that's going to hold onto that ball and limit your opportunities to get out there and have a chance to score. And it all starts with their quarterbacks. They do have 2 quarterbacks, Josh Johnson and Liam Sazaka. They're doing a little bit of a 2-quarterback system. I know that's a word that makes Boise State fans cower in the corner and beg for mercy. But for Air Force, it seems to be working okay for them so far. Now, they did just lose massively to US State, but I think there's some other problems there. So far, Josh Johnson, 9 of 16 for 224 yards passing, much more the passing quarterback, 2 touchdowns and interception, only 15 carries for 30 yards. Sazarka finished off the most of the game versus Utah State last week. He was 8 of 16 for 114 on the season. This includes week 1 as well. 0 touchdowns and interception, but he had 3 touchdowns on the ground versus Utah State. If there's anybody that gave Air Force a chance last week, it was Sazarka. I would expect that you would see a larger role out of him this week versus Boise State. You may still see Josh Johnson, again, a little bit of the better passer there, but I do think that Sazarka is probably going to play a heavier factor versus Boise State after his performance last week versus Utah State. 14 carries for 47 yards so far. However, the main threat in the Air Force running game are the next 2 players we're going to talk about. And again, like I said, it all starts with this one guy, the fullback. There's probably no more important player on the entire Air Force team than that fullback. If they can give the ball off to their fullback and turn out 4 yards, 3, 4 yards a carry every single play, Air Force is going to beat you. And Dylan Carson is playing decently well so far this season. He had a pretty good game versus Utah State. So far this season, 18 carries for 104 yards, 5.8 yard average, and a touchdown. Again, Boise State's defensive line has been probably the strength of this team. I would think you would say defensively really stepped up. A unit that had so many question marks. People had so many concerns about this defensive line, and they have tended to be the strongest unit on the team so far. They're going to need to continue that success. Again, Braxton Feely, but also the other guys on that unit and the depth shown. This is going to be an important game for them, stopping Dylan Carson. He is a massive weapon for Air Force. And then, lastly, wide receiver Cade Harris, who, of course, in an Air Force offense, you're not just going to go out and catch the ball. He has 16 rushes for 138 yards, only 5 catches, but those 5 catches for 146 yards receiving. So this is a do-it-all guy. He's going to be able to be out there on the pitch and a big threat for you in the running game, but obviously he can also get behind you, and he has some hands and some speed as well. So for Boise State, being able to stop these guys, it's going to come down to my key number 1 for Boise State, which is 20/20 eye discipline. I have a similar key to, like, in this general area in every Air Force game, because it is so much about the eye discipline. Every single player on the defense has to work together in perfect unity. I think you could say that for pretty much any offense that you face. That is obviously a general concept, but especially versus Air Force. That becomes key. If 10 guys do their job and one guy doesn't, they are going to break free on you, because that triple option, it is the hardest offense out there to stop. Now, they don't necessarily have the most elite players running it. The Air Force Academy obviously has restrictions that prevent them from being able to recruit some of the top tier athletes out there, but it doesn't matter because that system is so challenging to cover. The quarterback, the fullback can run. That's your first option. Then you pull out the quarterback can run. Boise State has had a lot of trouble stopping running quarterbacks, including the Eastern Washington quarterback 2 weeks ago, which thankfully, again, he is doing much better after the injury he took in that game. And then, obviously, the quarterback can pitch the ball out as well. And then for Air Force, they actually have a fourth option on you, which is they can actually throw the ball as well. Now, this Air Force team, not as good at that as other Air Force teams have been. Boise State has faced some real throwing quarterbacks for Air Force. Air Force is going to have their opportunities. You're so sucked into covering that run game that they will create those one-on-one or just even wide open players in the backfield that you will have trouble stopping. However, this Air Force team, not as potent passing the ball as other ones have been, it is still a major threat. And against against a Boise State team that all of those difficulties, those strengths of the Air Force program feed in perfectly to the Boise State weaknesses right now in their defense. To stop the triple option, to have that perfect eye discipline, it takes perfect chemistry between all levels of your defense. It takes elite discipline, and it takes great tackling. All three of those areas, Boise State has struggled massively through the first 2 weeks. Now, they did show improvement. They showed great improvement last week. Even considering it's an FCS team, there was definitely a different approach in how this defense came out in the field, very similar to how Boise State's quarterback situation played out in week 2. However, week 1 showed that Boise State was struggling to be a disciplined program. It wasn't about the way that Boise State lost that game and points, totals, and yards. It was about the approach the team took to being in that matchup. Just looked very, very undisciplined and unprepared. Now, Boise State's had a bye week. This could not have come at a better time. Boise State absolutely needed this to prepare for the Air Force triple option. It's probably the biggest thing that gives them a chance of winning this matchup is that bye week. Can they show the improvements in that chemistry? Boise State's had individual players play well, but they've also had individual players play very poorly as well, and that's let down the rest of the team. That is going to get exposed massively every play versus a team like Air Force. Can they have built that chemistry? Can they build that discipline? And can they have improved their tackling? All of that is going to come into play versus an Air Force team that will make you pay if you do not show those 3 areas. Boise's got to have that 2020 eye discipline versus Air Force. Key number 2 is step up when your name is called. Playing Air Force is exhausting. It really is. This is one of the hardest teams to play out there in college football because they just hold on to the ball. Even versus Utah State, a win, they still held on that ball for almost 17 more minutes than Utah State did. Defenses get absolutely worn down versus this rushing attack of Air Force, and is going to test your depth. And on top of that, you're playing at elevation. You're playing at the second highest stadium in college football in the FBS. Second highest stadium in the FBS, only behind Wyoming. Air Force is 6,621 feet elevation compared to Boise State, which is right around 2,600. That is a massive change. If you have never gone from a place of middle to low elevation to a area of very high elevation, it absolutely takes it out of you. Obviously, cardio and being prepared, like Boise State hopefully will be coming to this game, help. But regardless of how in condition Boise State is, Air Force is going to have an advantage when it comes to dealing with that elevation. When it just comes to lung capacity, Boise State's defense is going to be tested. Not just their first line, but their second line, and even in some positions, potentially their third line, especially when you're talking about that front 7. So when your name is called, you have to be ready to step up and play as good, if not better, than the first player. And this kind of plays out for a couple of players in Boise State's roster that have seen their starting positions fade for them. I think most fans are probably thinking about Banks. This is his opportunity. He is going to have to play in this game. He and Mickey both are going to be playing in this game. This has not been the good 2 weeks of the opening season, but that's the great thing about college football. You always have a chance to get back into it and show yourself again the next week that you have improved. coaches saw a lot out of Banks in practice coming into the season. This is his opportunity to prove himself, but it's not just his opportunity. Malik Sherrod, Sour Gaines, his star has been rising. Malik Sherrod, you're going to have to run more than one running back against this Air Force program. He is going to need to step up. Dylan Riley, he has already stepped up in his playing time, somewhat limited playing time, but he exploded last week. I expect him to have a bigger role when his number is called. He is going to need to step up. And Boise State has a host of young players that this is going to be your opportunity. Boise State's probably going to play more players in this game versus maybe a blowout where you get second, third string guys in key moments. This is probably going to be the most players played in key moments that Boise State sees all season. Boise State's going to have a lot of young guys that are going to step up, and this is going to be your opportunity to prove it. If the first few weeks haven't been what you wanted it to be, this is your chance to step up and be the player that you know you are capable of being. Boise State has a lot of young guys that are probably going to get those opportunities, like Travis Anderson, Sanusi, Bol, a couple guys that have played really well early on, showed up great in camp. Anderson getting an interception last week. I think Boise State's going to have to use these younger players in this matchup, and this is going to be the opportunity to step up and prove yourself. And so for Boise State, step up when your name is called, key number 2. Then key number 3 for Boise State is run, and run a little bit more. Boise State's offense so far, I've been calling for it to be more creative, and it does need to be more creative. But this is not the game where you come out with the crystal perfect passing attack, throw it all over the field type of offense, score quickly. Scoring quickly plays into Air Force's hands. Again, that defense is going to be tired in this matchup. Boise State needs to give their defense the opportunity to rest and play to their strength. Play to your strength in this game. Boise State's still developing chemistry between the quarterback and the wide receivers. You're starting to see some guys step up. Ben Ford, very exciting player, starting to show some Sean Monster type vibes from his senior season. Boise State has, obviously, Chris Marshall has been stepping up and playing well. Boise State's going to use the passing attack, and those guys are going to need to continue to build on that chemistry. But when you're talking about proven, established depth, that is in your running back room. For Boise State in this game, lean on your strength, lean on your running backs, lean on an offensive line that is built on some success and built a little chemistry last week versus Eastern Washington. Open up those opportunities for the passing game, but more than that, give your defense a break and lean into your depth. Play into your depth. You don't have a lot of depth. You don't have any depth at the quarterback position. You don't have very much depth at all at the wide receiver room. Your depth is in the running back game. You have 3 running backs that could all be starters in almost any Mountain West program. This is your opportunity to lean into that and use it to its most effective form. So for Boise State, 3 keys: 2020 eye discipline, step up when your name is called, and then run, and run a little bit more. So summarizing this game, who wins this matchup? Well, this is the last game of the series. A lot hangs on this, and that's kind of hard to say because even while it has been really tough to watch Boise State play Air Force because they are a very good team, I really have enjoyed these matchups. I've followed the Air Force program for a very long time. As I've talked about on this program, I have a long Air Force history. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad, and my uncle were all Air Force, and 3 of them were Air Force Academy grads. Now, they all root for Boise State, but we as a family have been following Air Force for a very long time, the Air Force football program for a very long time, and it's a little sad to see it come to the end. Now, as a Boise State fan, it is awesome that this matchup is coming to end because Air Force is so hard to play. Hats off to Air Force. They have had Boise State's number, and they have known how to come out for this one. I've talked to a lot of Air Force Academy grads, and they all say the students get fired up for facing Boise. It's never going to be the same as Navy or Army, but it's probably the closest matchup consistently that Boise State has had in the Mountain West. Again, not ever fully a rivalry because of how much respect there is from the Boise State community for the Armed Forces programs. So much respect for the military in Boise, and obviously never going to supplant true rivals like Navy and Army and the Air Force side, but there has been that somewhat rivalry element to this matchup, and it's kind of sad to see it come to an end, but Boise State does need to finish off this rivalry the way that it started under Kellen Moore in 2011. Finish this off the right way, just like Boise State entered into the Mountain West in 2011 and beat Air Force and won or tied, obviously, with TCU there to finish the Mountain West championship. Boise State has an opportunity to end their time versus in the Mountain West by beating Air Force again. So finish the way that you started here for Boise State. Air Force has a lot of advantages. Obviously, the elevation, like we talked about. revenge factor for Boise State wins in the past, but also from last week. That's not how Air Force wants to perform. Troy Calhoun has been coaching for a very long time, I believe since 2007. He's been around at Air Force for a very, very long time, and that's not the team that he wanted to put on the field. This is their opportunity to reclaim their season, similar to how Boise State is trying to reclaim their year. This is an opportunity for Air Force to reclaim their season. You can bet that they are going to be extremely motivated for this matchup. One of the top 3 games, obviously Air Force Army are ahead, but one of the top 3 games the rest of the year out. And like I said, Air Force's style plays perfectly into Boise State's weaknesses. However, Boise State is coming off of a bye week. I probably would not be making the prediction I'm about to make if Boise State was not coming off a bye week. If they'd played last week, I think this would be a very different result. However, Boise State is coming off of a bye week. They are fired up. I didn't know who played USF. I truly didn't recognize that team at all. The team that I saw versus Eastern Washington, not the score and the stat line, because obviously it was FCS, you expected that, but the way that team responded and stepped up after a devastating loss versus USF, the energy that those players had, the overall mentality that those players played with, that is what gives me confidence that this team can improve. USF was not a peak, obviously, and Boise State is going to get better every single game, and they've had a bye week, and they can improve. And for Boise State, I think our offense fits perfectly into what Air Force brings to the table. I think that the running ability of Boise State is going to give our defense an opportunity to get the rest that they need and open up passing opportunities for Boise State as well. Now, we still can't kick a football, and maybe that will come into play, but with my score prediction right now, I think Boise State keeps it out of a field goal game, but still keeps it close. My final score prediction for Boise State versus Air Force, Boise State 27 versus Air Force 21. So that's my score prediction. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know again, if you haven't already, go put your score prediction in the comments below. Go and put any thoughts you have on the game. Let me know where you think I may be off base. Let me know where you agree. Let's have that conversation, that discussion. Again, it's my favorite part of all my videos, getting to have the interaction with Bronco Nation. The entire reason that I do this channel is to have that interaction with each and every one of you. So please go and be involved in the comments below. And if you're an Air Force Falcon fan too, hey, I wouldn't call myself part of Falcon Nation, but I have been following and supporting Air Force football for a very long time as well. Again, Boise State, always number 1 there in my heart. But Air Force is still a program that I do love as well. So if you were part of this video, please put your thoughts and comments in the comments below as well. So again, thank you so much for watching. Please, again, make sure that you go and check out the grand opening for Expedia Cruises here in a couple weeks. Mark that on your calendar. Get it scheduled out so you can't miss it. Make sure you go get an opportunity to meet a couple of 3 great Boise State legends. And thank you again so much for watching. Make sure you check out the link to Expedia Cruises in my description of this video. Again, thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!